Hi guys, welcome back. It is honestly baking in London, unbearably hot. I absolutely know that there will be plenty of you from all sorts of far-flung countries who are dealing with crazier temperatures than this, thinking, what do you want about? 35 degrees is nothing. But we are not built for this. Everything is falling apart. I am sat here with the blinds shut. I've had a fan on the whole morning and I thought I'm gonna have to turn it off for the YouTube record, but I'm gonna have to also make this quick because I am literally about to boil. So anyway, I really hope that you're having a lovely week so far. And I do question and answers on my Instagram a couple of times a week. And some of those questions that have been coming through are basically the same question, just posed in slightly different ways. And I thought, what better way to address this complicated topic than talking to you guys in a YouTube episode. So we're going to be covering today why you're barely eating but not losing weight. Now, this is basically a case of you feeling like you're doing everything you need to be doing, right? You're skipping the bread, you're choosing the salad, you're going to the gym, you're doing all of the things that we think are quote unquote healthy or going to help you to see fat loss or weight loss. And it's not to say that those things in isolation are not good decisions. Maybe they are in the context of your current nutrition approach. But I wanted to cover the real reasons why this is the case, because I think it can often be seen as just some sort of inherent flaw within yourself as to why you're not seeing weight loss. In reality, there is literally always a reason. 10 out of 10 times, there is a reason. And when there's a reason, there's a method that we can apply in order to fix it, right? So there are several reasons as to why someone can feel like they are barely eating, barely touching food, but still not losing weight. And some of these might feel a little bit triggering, but I'm really going to try and approach this in a factual, evidence-based way. This is no judgment on anyone or anyone's circumstances, because there are a multitude of reasons. Some are behavioral, some are physiological, and some of them you might honestly not have even considered. But like I say, all of them are fixable. So we're going to start with the most common reason. And that is, in one way or another, you're eating more than you think you are. This is by a significant margin the most common reason as to why you're not seeing weight loss or fat loss when you're eating in what you consider to be a deficit, right? Now, there are lots of different aspects to this, but fundamentally, bottom line is that calories in are higher than you think they are. So firstly, when it comes to tracking, assuming you're tracking your food, if you're doing that and you're hitting on MyFitnessPal your goal target every single day, right? But in reality, when we think about the practical application of tracking, multiple studies tell us that people are out on estimating their calories, on tracking their calories by between 10 and 50%. Now, the people on the lower end of that range, those people are people with relatively high nutritional IQ, dietitians even, nutritionists. So this is not me saying you just have no idea how to track, you need to improve your tracking literacy, but it's a really common thing to see. And that really could be the difference between a 500 calorie deficit and maintenance, frankly, when you think about the degree of inaccuracy that we can see when we look at the studies. So where are these hidden calories coming from? Well, multiple places, honestly. So firstly, it might just be that your actual tracking practice is not quite where we want it to be. And the places I tend to see this is usually in two different spots. Firstly, we will see that people track some food, but not all food. So if we think about a meal, you may well have tracked the main components of your lunch, but you forgot to track the oil that you cooked it in, or you forgot to track the dressing you put on your salad, you forgot to track the butter that you put on your bread. Little bits here and there. So it's firstly about just identifying every element on your plate and actually making sure that you're capturing everything that is physically there. Particularly important when you think about those kind of butters and oils and dressings, because they tend to be pretty calorie dense. They might be small in terms of volume, but they actually pack a pretty decent calorie punch. So we definitely don't want to be not including them in tracking when we're thinking about fat loss and adhering to a deficit. The second place is just using units of measurements when tracking that aren't that precise. So something like a medium chicken breast. What is a medium chicken breast? We want to know how many grams of chicken breast you are eating. Things like a cup of oats, things like a tablespoon of oil. There is room for error here. So you want to be choosing your units of measurements and sticking to those. I tend to use grams and milliliters for liquids. And in order to do that, you are going to have to use a food scale. You cannot eyeball this. If you're in a deficit, it's just not something you want to leave to chance. You want to be weighing these things out and logging them appropriately. Deciding that that bowl of rice is around 150 grams is really leaving you open to those calories being inaccurate when it comes to the tracking piece. I'm someone who doesn't track at maintenance at this point in my journey, and will often kind of sense check, okay, I think that's around 100 grams of chicken breast, pop it on a food scale, and what do you know, it's 100 grams of chicken breast. But if I was to enter a deficit, even knowing that I have a pretty solid level of nutritional IQ, particularly when it comes to what is in my food and tracking calories, I would still be using a food scale and tracking everything. If I'm going to be putting in the effort to lose body fat, which is a stress on my body, it's a stress on my mind, I'm going to have to make some compromises in day-to-day life, then I want to be doing it properly. I'm not interested in half-assing. So outside of tracking inaccuracies, either by guesstimating or not including everything that you are actually eating, the other piece is around just a bit of a gap in knowledge as to what is in food. So we can look at foods and see them as healthy, and actually from a nutritionally complete profile, maybe they are, right? Maybe they give you loads of vitamins and minerals and some healthy fats and a bit of protein. But in terms of calories, which is really the main thing that matters when it comes to a deficit, they can be pretty costly. So you might be thinking, I'm going to eat healthy today. I'm going to make sure that I am taking just healthy snacks along with me, and I'm going to eat what I have on my person. No ultra processed foods, whole foods only. And that is objectively great. But if the goal is fat loss and you've grabbed a bag of mixed nuts to take with you to work, you could literally be talking about 600 or 700 calories in a bag of one of those. Like, is extremely costly in terms of calorie intake. Things like peanut butters, oils, nuts, cheeses, those sorts of things tend to be pretty high in fat, which again is not an inherently bad thing. But the thing that really matters when it comes to whether fat loss happens or not is overall calories. So you definitely want to be building on your knowledge around what is in food so that you can accurately make those decisions that best align with your calorie budget that you're working to. Another thing to avoid is chaotic eating patterns. So a lot of the time when you've decided it's time to diet, we can see that people will skip breakfast, they'll skip a morning snack, they will just wait until say 2 o'clock in the afternoon to have their first meal because maybe they're not that hungry in the morning. But when that happens, you tend to find that you spend a little more time than we would like on the lower end of what we call the hunger scale. It just means that it's much more difficult to regulate how much food you eat in one sitting, and you're much less able to actually tune in to what your body is telling you when it is satisfied, when it is full. Or maybe you're eating very, very little Monday through Friday and then completely losing control at the weekend. Whatever that erratic nature actually looks like, it is just a bad idea and a bad strategy for fat loss. We want to keep meals regular, every 3 to 4 hours, roughly at similar times each day. We want those meals to actually fill us up. Less picking, grazing, snacking, more sitting down for proper meals at regular intervals that your body can predict and start to regulate to. So really the truth about this section is when someone feels like they're barely eating but not losing weight, the calories are always there. Okay, this section that I'm talking about right now, the calories are there. They are just invisible. Okay, a little harder to spot. Either you're not tracking those little bits and pieces that I've mentioned that have a big caloric impact. Some of the clean foods, the whole foods that you are eating are still pretty costly when it comes to calories. Liquid calories like milks and alcohol. Maybe you're having a glass of wine with your dinner. Maybe you're not eating all day, but then sitting down and realizing that you've eaten to the point of uncomfortable fullness because you've been starving all day. All of these things essentially mean one thing, and that is you're eating more than you think you are. Another reason, and less common for not seeing any weight loss, but it might explain slower weight loss than you expected, especially if section 1 did not apply to you. And that is, you're not moving as much as you think. So you can see we're covering both ends of the energy in, energy out scale here. Now, it might be that you train 3-4 times a week. You regularly get to the gym, you train hard, good level of intensity, good level of volume, and that's obviously fantastic. But then if you're spending the rest of the day, the 23 hours left in your day, being very, very sedentary, and your steps are at say 3,000 or 4,000, then it's going to be pretty difficult for you to be maximizing that chunk of your metabolism that is attributed to non-exercise movement, right? The kind of spontaneous movement throughout the day. If you find yourself often taking the lift, never taking the stairs, getting in the car when you could just take a 10-minute walk, all of these things will add up. So rather than telling yourself, if you're someone who's getting 3,000 steps a day, from tomorrow, I'm going to hit 10K every single day, we want this to be something that you can genuinely do day in, day out, consistently. So think about increasing your steps by say 2,000 to 3,000 a day. And that would genuinely have a big impact on that overall energy expenditure piece, which can often just help move fat loss along a little quicker. Okay, now sometimes, not always, but sometimes you are losing fat, but you're just not able to see it in the way that you imagine you should be seeing it. So when we're thinking about our data points for fat loss, most people are looking at the scale. And I'm not saying that that's not a good measure. It is, right? If the scale is not moving at all over the course of many, many weeks, then it's fair to say we're not seeing any significant fat loss. The scale does have to be trending down. But if you're not interpreting the scale data in the way that you should be, then it's really easy to lull yourself into the mindset of I'm not making any progress, or the progress I'm making is not acceptable in relation to the goal that I have for myself. So what this tends to look like is someone hopping on the scale once a week on a Monday morning. This is objectively a pretty bad idea. Unless we're really lucky, it doesn't tell us much about the trend. The thing about our body weight is that it will categorically always forever fluctuate. You will see a fluctuation range that is quote unquote normal for your body. In my experience, that tends to be somewhere between 0.5 kilo and up to 3 kilos, depending on things like menstrual cycle is a big one, things like training, things like nutrition, things like sleep, things like stress. It really does depend on the person as to what is normal for them, but getting to know what your fluctuation range is a really key part of any body composition journey. So I would definitely suggest, when we're thinking about fat loss particularly, is hopping on the scales every single morning before you've eaten or drunk anything, at a minimum 3 times a week. We want to be seeing the wiggly line, but we want to be seeing what direction that wiggly line is traveling in. As a rule of thumb, if you have seen no movement downwards in that trend over the course of 2 weeks or more, then it is safe to say there is no deficit being created. Either you're eating more than you think, or you are moving less than you think, or maybe it's both. The scales can be deceitful day to day, but they do not lie over time. Now, there is one other category that absolutely applies, but really this is one where people have been dieting for a long time, or at least attempting to diet for a really long time. So eating in a restrictive way, restricting their calories pretty significantly. And maybe they saw initially in those first 3-4 months that weight had tracked down pretty significantly. They'd lost a good amount of body weight. But then for some reason, they just never really stopped. They never really thought about, okay, now I need to get back to maintenance. Now I need to think about not dieting, right? I want to get back to feeling good and training hard. They've just continued in that diet mindset for maybe as long as they can remember. Oftentimes this is years. And when that is the case, over time, your body will downregulate. It gets pretty clever pretty savvy with the resources that it has. So if you are telling your body over the course of many months and even years that we have limited resources available, at a certain point, it's going to start listening to you and being a little bit more cautious about where it spends those resources. And this isn't always something that you can control. You can keep your steps at 10,000 a day all you like, but it's the subconscious, spontaneous energy that will start to slow down. So that neat section of your metabolism will start to get less and less impactful on your overall energy expenditure pie. Your body temperature will drop slightly, which is why when people are chronically dieting or chronically underfueled, they tend to feel cold all the time. Your digestion even will slow down, which again, people that chronically diet will find that constipation is a pretty big problem. Now, when you think about all of those internal processes, you can see how your overall energy burn can easily be put into a decreased state after a prolonged period of dieting. You may also lose your menstrual cycle, which again is obviously a vital sign for women's health. This is not irrelevant to you if you don't want to have a child. It is about much more than just reproduction. We need to be protecting your bones, protecting your strength, your ability to actually be independent as you age. A healthy menstrual cycle is a huge part of that. Now, you might have heard of this process being called metabolic adaptation or adaptive thermogenesis. It's a really well-documented physiological response to a prolonged calorie restriction. Now, in this case, the facts still remain. There is no deficit present if you're not losing weight. So even if your baseline energy needs, your metabolism has dropped down, your deficit calories that were once a deficit for you are no longer a deficit. The only way to continue on that fat loss journey is to drop those calories down. Now, would I recommend that? Absolutely not. If that is this position that you are in and you are objectively eating 500-600 calories less than a calorie calculator tells you should be maintenance for you, the idea of dropping those calories further and just allowing your body to regulate more and more and more down towards that level is a terrible idea. If that is the case, the best thing you can be doing is getting yourself back to a decent level of maintenance calories. Forgetting about dieting for now, taking a breather, getting your body back into a position where it is much more happy to lose fat. It has those extra resources available. It's quite content to just let go of some of those body fat stores. So the target is to get your actual maintenance intake roughly aligned with what a calorie calculator or a coach suggests that your maintenance level should be. Once you're there, once you're in a position where you're training hard, you're feeling good, your energy levels are back up, your body temperature's in a good place, you got a healthy menstrual cycle, all of those things that can happen as a result of that down regulation. Once you've seen that upregulation happen in the opposite way, you can then look to diet once more from a much healthier place. If chronic restriction got you to the place that you are now, more restriction is not the answer. You're going to have to fix those foundations first. So let's bring it all together. If you are barely eating and not losing weight, there is a 4-point checklist for you to look for. Number 1, you're eating more than you think. You're not tracking accurately. You're missing out on certain elements of your meals that aren't going tracked. Hidden calories, untracked snacks or grazing, weekend flexibility that goes untracked, portion inaccuracy, all are culprits in this. Find the hidden calories and you may well find your answer. 2, you're moving less than you think you are. You might be training regularly, but if your day-to-day life is extremely sedentary, then that could be the reason why fat loss isn't happening maybe as quickly as it should be. Number 3, you are simply misreading the scale. Great news about this one, it's the easiest one to fix. Just start tracking the day-to-day data more closely and learn how to interpret the trends rather than getting your knickers in the twist about the odd fluctuation, which you quite literally cannot avoid. And number 4, if you've been dieting for a really long time and you can feel some of those symptoms that I've just mentioned, symptoms of a down-regulated metabolism, then the answer is starting a journey to rebuilding your metabolism back up, getting you to a decent level of maintenance calories before you can successfully lose fat again in a way that isn't quite so prolonged and quite so restrictive, to avoid this happening again. Now, all of these things are problems. They are objectively problems, but they all have solutions. There truly is no reason whatsoever as to why fat loss is impossible for you. I truly believe that. It's harder in some cases. It's harder with certain chronic conditions. It's harder at certain times of life, like perimenopause or menopause, but it is not impossible. The key is figuring out what is actually happening and where those problems are lying so that you know what solution you need to fix it and keep you moving forward. I really hope that was helpful. You can always leave your questions in the comments. If you want to join the waitlist for coaching, you can do so using the link in the description. And I will see you this time next week, where hopefully I'm not having to wipe beads of sweat off of my top lip. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will speak to you soon. Love you. Bye.